Ah, video games. They're so much fun to play. They can be relaxing. They can be rewarding to complete. They can even bring people together. So good. You know what else can be fun and rewarding though? Making video games. That's right, creating a game from scratch is one of the most rewarding feelings you can have. Developing a game will force you to learn new skills, learn new ways of solving problems, and even introduce you to an entirely new community of friendly and helpful people. So let's make a game then. You most likely clicked on this video because you are just starting off with GameMaker or are thinking about starting off, and you want to learn the basics of game development. Well, that's exactly what this video and its companion videos will focus on, the very basics. So what exactly is GameMaker Studio? GameMaker Studio is a piece of software for Windows and Mac that allows anyone to create and share games. It is a workspace designed to make the game development process much easier and faster compared to coding a game from scratch using a traditional programming language like C or Java. GameMaker does have its own programming language called GML, which you will need to learn. However, GameMaker has tons of built-in functions and tools that streamline the development process. You can have a prototype of your awesome game idea up and running within hours. Some of the more famous games made in GameMaker include Undertale, Levelhead, Rivals of Aether, Hyperlight Drifter, and Nuclear Throne, to name a few. Who am I, you may be asking? Well, my name is Alex, and I have been part of the GameMaker community for over 5 years, and have created many small games and helped countless people solve their game development issues. As a moderator for the GameMaker Subreddit for over 3 years, I have seen problems of all types and flavors. One of the most common help posts I come across are, "How do I get started?" or posts asking for recommendations for learning GML. My number one response to these posts is always to simply read the documentation. The documentation supplied with every copy of GameMaker lists and explains literally everything that you can do in GameMaker, and reading through it all gives you a great foundation to start on. This video is simply going to be a type of visual representation of some of the most used and basic functions listed in the documentation. I will cover your very first moments with GameMaker and make sure you have a solid handle on what you can do with this piece of software. So let's get GameMaker. You can purchase GameMaker Studio 2 at yoyogames.com. Links in the description. You of course have to create an account with Yo-Yo Games to be able to purchase and use the software. As of September 2019, for no money at all, you can get a full-featured 30-day trial demo, which should be more than enough time to see if you like the software or not. For $40, you can get a 12-month license to use the software. And for $100, you can purchase a permanent license. Do note that GameMaker Studio goes on sale about 3 times a year for various discounts, so keep an eye out for those sales if you really want to stretch your dollar. Although I can tell you from personal experience that I believe $100 for the permanent license is incredibly worth it and totally a bargain for what you get. This license allows you to export and share your games for PC only. Exporting to consoles or to web is a separate module that you can look up on their website. Alright then, we have GameMaker downloaded and installed. So we're gonna go ahead and fire it up. The first thing it's gonna do, it's gonna prompt you to log in so that it can authenticate. And after you log in, you should be presented with this getting started screen. Since we're gonna be creating a project, a brand new project from scratch, let's go ahead and click on new. And then we have 2 options here, drag and drop, GameMaker language. Let's go ahead and ignore drag and drop. We're not going to use that. We're going to use GameMaker language. It is the far better choice. So clicking on that's going to prompt us to name our project. Crazy Carl Quest is the name of our project. We are making a top-down RPG. Why? Because I feel like with an RPG, we're going to get a good sample of everything that GameMaker has to offer. RPGs can include pretty much anything we want it to. So we're going to get a nice sampling of everything and learn as much as we can with this one game type. So, like with any piece of software, you can modify it to your needs. So go ahead and click on File and Preferences, and all this is optional, of course. However, if you want your IDE to look just like mine, so you can follow it easier, go ahead and make these changes. So for starters, I am in the dark mode, dark skin. I don't know, I'm pretty sure that's the default, but if you're in light, go ahead and click on here so that you can change it to dark, and it's gonna look like this, which in my opinion is a lot better for visibility. Down here, I like to have disable IDE transition animations ticked. This makes everything a little snappier and faster, which I enjoy. Background, here you can assign an image to the background here of the workspace. You can put whatever you want. However, I like to have no image. Again, less distractions and less clutter. So I have no image. And then finally down here in text editor, I like to have all these ticked. Open scripts in full screen, open shaders, objects and events in full screen editor. This makes it so when you click on an objects and you want to modify it and it opens up the editor, it's going to open up in full screen, again, reducing clutter and making it easier to read. So once you make those changes, click apply and OK, and we're ready to go. So the very first thing you're going to see here, or a very important aspect, is the resource tree over here on the right side. For starters, if you click on the tab up here where it says resources, you can actually drag this window around. You can even leave it floating. You can even move it to a different monitor. However, I like to have it on the left side. So if you move to the left, extreme left, it'll dock itself like that. And I just prefer it that way. And also down here at the bottom of the resource tree, you're going to see a slider. Moving that around will zoom in and out the text. So I'm going to zoom it in so that it fills in the window like this, making it easier to read for both you guys and for me. Now, every time you create a new project, GameMaker automatically creates a new empty room for you. Let's go ahead and right click on this room 0 and then delete it. That way we have a completely fresh, brand new project with no assets. So let's go ahead and talk about these assets, right? We have sprite, sounds, path, objects, rooms. Hopefully some of these words you've seen before and you may understand what they are, at least a little bit. Games are obviously composed of assets. They have music, they have sound effects, they have graphics. And so that's all what these resources are, right? The sprites are your graphics, how your game looks. The sounds are your sound effects and your music. Objects are, you know, anything that you interact with. And the rooms are basically the world or the levels where your objects reside. So the very first sprite, or the very first resource that we're going to make, is a sprite. So we're going to go ahead and right click where it says sprites and then click create sprite. This is going to open the Sprite Editor. First thing you want to do when creating a new asset is name it and give it a good name. So we're going to call this SPR_hero because this is going to be the graphic that our hero object is going to use. Now, why did we put SPR at the beginning? Because this is a sprite. If this were an object, we would call it OBJ_hero. If this were a room, we would start with RM_ something. This helps us organize our assets. And when we're going to be coding and we want the autocomplete to help us, it's going to make a lot of sense to preface our assets with these words, with these letters. Trust me, later on, it's going to save your life and it's going to make things a lot easier to read and write. So SPR hero, if you hit enter, boom, it saves it. So now we have a sprite. However, the sprite is empty. It has nothing in it. What you could do is go ahead and double click on this empty canvas up here, and it's going to open up the actual editor. And here you can actually draw whatever you want to draw. However, most people agree, and I agree, that this editor is not very good. You are far better off creating your graphics in a separate program like Sprite, Paint.net, or Inkscape, and then importing them into GameMaker. So we're gonna go ahead and close out this editor. I mean, we could use this graphics. If you just close it out, we have our sprite, and there it is, and you can see it and you can use it. However, if you click on import right here, we're gonna navigate to where I have my graphics. And I already have this little hero graphic. Boom. You can import PNGs, JPEGs, BMPs, lots of other file types. Not ideally, but most people use PNGs. They're nice and high quality and small file size. And so we've imported this graphic, and so now it's ready to go. Almost, not really. We're gonna go ahead and click on this size, and we're gonna wanna resize it to be exactly 16 by 16 because we want all our graphics to be 16 by 16, like so. We're gonna go ahead and double click, make sure nothing got cut off. I'm not sure why it said it was 17 since I exported it as 16, but regardless, we're sure now that it's 16 by 16, and there's your graphics. There's lots of other things you can modify here, but for now, we're just gonna leave it as is. We'll come back to this later in a different video. Let's go ahead and create another sprite while we're here. So go ahead and right click again, create sprite, and this time we're gonna call this guy SPR_grass1. And you can hopefully know where I'm going with this. We're gonna hit import and then import this little grass PNG file. This one is already 16 by 16, so that's good. We're done. We have our two graphics sprites. Now by themselves, they're kind of useless. You can't really do anything with them. What these sprites do is give a graphic to an object, right? An object is anything that you can interact with in a game. Obviously, the hero is an object. The power-up that you find in the cave is an object. Enemies tend to be objects. Anything in the game that moves or you can interact with is usually an object. Objects are very important. They're fundamental piece to pretty much every game. So we're going to go ahead and create our first object by right-clicking object and then create object. Again, the first thing you want to do is name it, and since it's an object, we're going to preface it with obj_hero. And then, like I said, we can associate the sprites that we just made to this object. So go ahead and click where it says no sprite, and it should let you select one of the sprites that you have created. So we're going to go ahead and select on the hero sprite, and boom, we've just associated our hero sprite to our hero object. We're going to do the exact same thing, but for our grass. So we're going to name it object or obj grass1. And we're going to click on no sprite to assign it the grass sprite. And boom, we're done creating our two objects with the two sprites. However, these objects right now are just floating in space. They actually don't exist. There's nowhere to put these objects, right? Every game has a setting, right? You're in a forest, you're in space, you're in a desert, you're on a game board or something. So we need to create a location for these objects to reside. So in GameMaker, a location or a place is a room. So we're going to right click on room and click create room. This automatically shifts you into the room editor. But before we do anything in here, let's go ahead and go back to the resource tree, which you can get to up here by clicking up here, the resources, room editor, resources. So that way we can go back here and rename it. Honestly, I don't know another way to rename rooms. So this is how I usually do it. So since it's a room, we're going to start with RM underscore, and we're just going to call it grass field. So now we have a room called grass field. Cool. So let's go ahead and go click up here to go back into the room editor. And the first thing we're going to do is change the size of this room, because right now it's of width 1024 by height 768, which is too big. We don't want it to be that big. Instead, we're going to make this room, I have it written down over here, 480 by 270. Now, why those numbers? Because they are complementary to a 1080p resolution. And as you guys may know, 1080p is the most common, or one of the most common resolutions for PC screens. And by making our game have a resolution complementary to that, it's gonna make it look the best it can. It's just gonna look good. Now, why not use actual 1080p? Well, because we don't need that many pixels. Keeping our game resolution small is gonna make the game easier to manage. simpler to make, honestly. We just don't need all those pixels. Since our game is going to be using pixel art graphics, because those are the easiest for me to draw and or to get, that's where we're using pixel arts, and it's just going to keep things simple and easy by keeping everything small, including the resolution. So, as you may have noticed, you can pan around the room by clicking the middle mouse button and dragging. If you hold Control and zoom in with the mouse, you can zoom in on your room and zoom out. So that's how you navigate around the room. So now that we have our room, it's completely empty. Let's go ahead and put in our objects that we just created. So if you click back on the resources tree, it's real simple. All you gotta do is click on the object you want and drag it over. Boom. Click on it again and drag another one, and drag another one, and drag another one. Special note here though, remember that every time you drag an object into your room, you're instantiating a copy of that object. So when we run the game, right now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grass objects, and that's not a big deal. A single object doesn't take up that much memory in your PC. However, it does take up some amount of memory in your computer. So if we were to drag in, 100, 1,000, 100,000 of these grass objects, we would have 100,000 copies of this object, each taking up some amount of memory. And if we have that many, it's going to actually slow down our system, right? Games have requirements. Games have system resource requirements, and if we have too many objects, it's going to require too many resources from our computer, and it's going to slow it down. Now, obviously, we're probably not going to have to worry about that because our game is going to remain simple and small, but it is something to keep in the back of your mind. Too many objects or too many unnecessary objects is bad game design. You don't want to have more objects than really you need. But for now, we don't have to worry about it too much, because even if we were to fill this entire room with grass objects, which is what we're going to do, it's really not going to affect our system. However, as you can see, as I'm dragging in the grass, they're not lining up together. There's gaps in between. That's because our grid is, I believe, 32 by 32. So if you click up here where this grid icon is, you can actually toggle the grid on and off by clicking this button. And if you click on the arrow next to it, you can change the size of the grid. So we're going to go ahead and change it to 16 by 16 because that's how big our grass is. Now, you can drag in each one individually, or you're going to hold the Alt key and then just drag and click everywhere you want, and it'll basically paint the grass objects into our world, like so. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like you can fill in a room with objects, which is fine because what I'm doing right now is definitely not what you want to be doing. Creating this many objects, it's not too many objects, but it's just an inefficient way to do this. However, for now, we're not coding anything. We're doing everything manually, which is fine because we're just getting a handle on how things work. I'm gonna go ahead and leave a section blank so we know what it looks like. I've been selecting tiles this whole time. There we go. I'm gonna leave that area blank so that we know what it looks like, oops, when we don't have a tile there. I accidentally made some tiles outside the room. How do you delete it? Simple. You click it, delete. Click it, delete, as in hit the delete key on your keyboard. You can obviously select multiple. If you hold shift and click and drag, you can select multiple objects and then hit delete, and it'll delete them all. Now let's go ahead and put our hero object right there. Something I failed to mention, if you're trying to drag an object and it's not letting you place it in the room, you may have accidentally clicked on this background layer, right? Instances are objects and backgrounds are backgrounds. If you have the background selected, it's not going to let you put in an object, right? It gives you a prompt. Hey, this isn't a background thing. You can't do that. So you want to make sure you have the instances layer selected because we're working with instances, right? Obviously, we don't normally want to have two heroes, so we only need one hero. So there, we created two sprites, we created two objects, we created one room, and then we filled the room with our objects. We did it all manually, but it's all good, still works the same. So now we're going to go ahead and click on File Save to save our project. And then if you click this play button here, it's going to run the game. You can also hit F5. So we're gonna hit the play. It's gonna automatically compile the game and open up a little window. Here it is, and there it is. This is our room. When you only have, or basically when you run your game, GameMaker automatically opens the room at the very top of the room list. Since we only have one room, this is the room that's at the top of the list. And so it automatically opened it up, and it's showing us what we placed in the room, all our grass objects and our hero object. And there it is, first game. Obviously we can't move our hero, we can't do anything in this game because we haven't coded any logic, but I just want to show how easy it is to create some assets and put them in there and get something going. Very easy, very fun. So in the next video, we're gonna start working with code so that we can actually make things move and do stuff. So thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please make sure to hit that like button, and I will see you on the next video. Thank you.